Bahout is director of the Issam Fars Institute for Public Policy at the American University of Beirut. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you for having me.
What's your takeaway after listening to Hassan Nasrallah's speech?
Look, I think that actually what the speech has done is something of expected. I don't think anyone would have expected him either to announce the entry of Hezbollah in the war, nor to say that this is something that is not of Hezbollah's concern. I think he did exactly what he was expected to do, which was mainly two things. First of all, saying we are in this fight in a way or another, and this is our fight like all the other factions of what we call the axis of resistance in the region. Each component of this axis, and this is what he made clear, has its own tempo, agenda, constraints, terrain, and each one will act accordingly to these. The second thing that he did, I think, is to, in a way, upgrade the threshold of deterrence with Israel by saying, we will keep on fighting low to mid-level warfare in the south with you, because our contribution to the Gaza war, Hezbollah's contribution, is to open a sort of diversion front and a sort of, let's say, encroachment front. And the diversion is an encroachment, meaning that by doing that, we are preventing the Israeli army of deploying more units in Gaza, and this is a service that we are rendering to the Gaza battle. And second, it could change also if you upgrade your operations towards Lebanon, like a little bit what you wanted to do in the beginning of the war, meaning a preemptive attack on Lebanon.
So wait a minute, Joseph, on this point, there seems to be a contradiction in what Hassan Nasrallah said. On the one hand, like you say, the axis of resistance, we're each going to play our part. On the other, there was that part, he almost seemed to be contradicting that initial Wall Street Journal article, which talked about a meeting in Beirut on the Monday before October 7th to coordinate, saying this was all the Palestinians who took the initiative on this.
Look, I usually don't take what I read for face value. I mean, completely. I respect the Wall Street Journal, but I don't know what is the origin of this. What I can understand as an analyst here is that there is a very narrow cooperation and coordination between Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, etc., with Iran. In the month before, and the Wall Street Journal did not discover anything new, it was publicly known in Beirut that Hamas leadership and Jihad Islami leadership were in Beirut. They visited several times. In my analysis, personally, I don't have a doubt that the October 7 operation was a little bit coordinated between all these factions. What Hassan Nasrallah was saying tonight was not exactly that there was nothing at all, but I think what he was aiming to say is to say we all coordinate together, we all fight under one banner politically, but operationally each one of us has its own or their own, let's say, agenda, constraints, and modus operandi, which is a way of course, putting a distance between what happens in Gaza and Lebanon, but also of saying this is not a sort of Pavlovian unified front where if you shoot a bullet at Gaza, things with Yemen will flare up. This is, I think, the aim of what he said. Now, to get back to what we were saying, and this is exactly what he meant, he said, okay, we could change the rules of engagement with Israel given two conditions or two factors. One is if things in Gaza go very sour for Hamas, and for the time being, we, Hezbollah, consider that Hamas is doing the job properly, and he gave many examples of the 2006 war with Hezbollah. And second, the other condition is that if you Israeli really get over certain thresholds in the south of Lebanon, and we are obliged to answer. So he reiterated stronger rules of engagement in the south of Lebanon front, and he added to that an unknown that I think the Israeli planners will take very seriously. The unknown is, where is the threshold in Gaza where Hezbollah considers that it has to enter the fray. A last point, if you allow me. The most important point in the speech was towards the Americans, and it was exactly to say, you don't want a global confrontation. We are not looking for a global confrontation. If you really don't want it, you have to pressure your Israeli friends and allies in order not to exceed a certain dose of warfare in Gaza and in the region, because this would drag on the entire region, including Iran, in a confrontation no one really wants.
And we've had since a tit-for-tat sort of warning coming from the Americans. Joseph Bahout, for people who don't follow Hezbollah closely, there's this whole orchestration each time Hassan Nasrallah makes a speech. He'd been silent since October 7th. When he speaks, it's announced. They had like a video clip on social media as if it was a movie trailer. And then he of course doesn't appear in public. He appears on a TV screen in front of a crowd. It's slickly produced by television. Tell us about that. Why?
I mean, two things. First of all, the fact that Hassan Nasrallah is not appearing in public has to do with the new security, let's say, constraints and measures that Hezbollah is applying to itself since probably the 2 years following the 2006 war. I think Nasrallah stopped appearing in something like 2008 or 2009. This is something. The other part of your question, yes, is a bit, I mean, I could say a little bit interesting or funny. Hezbollah has led all over the past week a sort of very intense psychological mediatic warfare by diffusing these 3 or 4 trailers on Twitter, on social media. My feeling today, after having heard the speech, is that the speech was much bleaker than the trailers or the previews that were aired. But I think it was also a way to put the Israeli party in a very nervous climate. And I think that the fact that even yesterday the American National Security Advisor was saying that even the US is waiting for the speech of Hassan Nasrallah is part of the strategy of putting the party here in Lebanon at par with global powers like the US, like Israel, like others, by saying we are not a small operator in the region. We are a party that is able to put the entire region on its nerves. And this was, I think, the main aim of it. I think that after listening to the discourse, yes, we can maybe smile or mock a little bit this kind of mediatic filmographic warfare that was a bit overblown and overdone.
You heard our correspondent Rawad Taha talk about how the rest of Lebanon, those that don't support Hezbollah, anxious this Friday.
Yeah.
When Hassan Nasrallah speaks, is it the voice of Tehran, or is he paying attention to the domestic audience that is anxious?
It's not contradictory. He's much awaited because he's a close ally to Tehran and because he means what he says usually. I can tell you that this morning, as of 2 o'clock, the streets were empty. Everybody was home to listen to the speech. People were saying, okay, tonight we'll know if we're entering the war or not. So he's not only a small operator, I would say. The problem is that Nasrallah, after the speech, in a way or another, did not answer or did not quell the Lebanese anxiety, because tonight, I mean, we don't know if the war is over for Lebanon or if the odds that we join the war again in 2-3 weeks is still there. And I think that this is exactly what he wanted to convey in his speech. By keeping the uncertainty, he had to speak because it's been 1 month since the flare-up in Gaza and the war of Gaza. So he had to say something, and he had to say something that will prolong and maybe underline and highlight this kind of deterrent message, which is forcibly a message of ambiguity. And he used the term ambiguity 2 or 3 times in his speech willingly, and this was exactly what he wanted to extend as a message. I think the only clear message he sent was to the Americans saying, if you don't want this war to become a regional confrontation that it will include Iran at some point, you have at some point to intervene and put a limit to the Israeli adventure in Gaza.
Joseph Bahout, many thanks for joining us from Beirut.
My pleasure.